So the business education or enterprise education in New Zealand is a very late comer to the secondary education area. The point was made by Tony Falkenstein, with whom we have contact, that a student will go to university to take French, for example, and they've already done it for 5 years at school. A student will go to university and pick up business. They have never had any formal business education whatsoever. They may have had accounting and economics, but they're far removed from the spirit or skills of entrepreneurship. So that's really where we came from with this. You saw those young students on Peter's video, and you probably, well, I felt they demonstrated fantastic self-esteem, self-efficacy, leadership, confidence, and all of that came, I think, from firstly their very strong support from family, church and community. That was a big dynamic, definitely. But the other thing is that they were given the opportunity through Education for Enterprise to basically be themselves and express through enterprise. Some of you are possibly frustrated entrepreneurs who've had a lifelong experience of education just chipping you into shape. And some of you are now small but perfectly formed, you might say. You know, we've all been through this education experience where they encourage you to find out what the right answer is. They don't encourage you to ask what if, what could I do here, why does it always have to be that way? And that's a real entrepreneurship, what would I say, mainspring of entrepreneurship, that line of questioning. Anyway, so just a bit of preamble. The Young Enterprise Trust has been operating about 33 years now. It was set up from the business community in response to their perceiving a need to get some business education off the ground in New Zealand. The secondary schools just weren't doing it, and so they stepped in. Now, Young Enterprise Trust has 10 different programs that go from years 1 to 8, 9 and 10, and then the senior school. So the senior school, years 11 to 13, middle school 9, 10, and primary and intermediate 5 to 8, or 0 to 8. And so they are the only organisation in New Zealand that really offers a strong vertical integrated enterprise scheme. And so we thought, if we're looking at developing real opportunities for students earlier in the education and their education, it makes sense possibly to work with Young Enterprise. And Malama's point about the GEM results showing that there was a desire for this seemed important. Findings from the work that Peter and others did out west, the Young Enterprise Scheme, which was one of these projects from Young Enterprise Trust, just one of 10 schemes, that worked really well with the multiple age levels. So usually it's senior school only, but in this case it was right through from years 9 to 13, and it worked really well. Yeah. Now partly that's a reflection of the community that it was steeped in because of the family and community values. Second point, they nailed it. These guys came from nowhere to go where straight away. They took out the regional competition and placed well in national, which is an extremely good result for a cold start. But what's really interesting to me was the parent community picked up on it as well, and so we had a low decile school from a relatively impoverished community, and the parents sort of took the learning home, and there were some self-start businesses. Now I thought that's really very interesting. Point number 4, it's all about resourcing. So we'll just move on to that. So, social cognitive career theory is one of the theoretical tools used to analyse what entrepreneurship education is and whether it works or not and how it works. And so, in a nutshell, it says our career choices are affected by distal influences, such as our lifelong influences, and proximal influences which are close to us at the time we make the decision. So pretty obvious really, but if you start to think about it like that, it starts to make sense. Educational efforts in enterprise education are almost always proximal. That is, they're almost late teenage, and it's about the here and now and about the opportunity. Okay? So just get that? So what that's either doing is it's supporting influences that you've brought with you to that experience. For example, if you were raised in a family with a business and you go to entrepreneurial education, then your proximal and your distal influences are working together. If you were raised in a family that had no business experience, had no real interest for whatever reason, then for entrepreneurial education to make you into an entrepreneur, it's probably going to be overcoming those distal influences. Okay? So we're thinking lifelong distal influences and then a burst of proximal influences. Right? Was that a noise from you?
That's not me.
Oh, who was that person?
Michael, can you please turn off your mobile phone? Sorry.
No, that's all right. It's one of the entrepreneurs.
That wasn't me.
I'll just say one more thing about entrepreneurs at schools. I don't know if you know, but if you're dyslexic at school, you probably have a pretty crap time. But if you're dyslexic, you have 4 times the chance of being a millionaire than someone who is not dyslexic. If you're an entrepreneur at school, you're always in trouble, right? You can tell the entrepreneurs, they generally wear patterned shirts. And they arrive late.
They ride bikes.
I resemble that comment.
And so entrepreneurs in particular may have had a rather unpleasant school experience. This one, excuse me. So this table here, just looking at the distal, the lifelong influences versus this. Proximal influence. Did you alter that? Oh, there it is. Did you change it? Entrepreneur. Thank you. So just thinking, entrepreneurial education, these entrepreneurial kids have had a bad time at school, quite possibly, not always, but often, and they come to entrepreneurial education and hopefully it reinforces them, says, actually you have validity, you have a place, go to it, etc. What's more interesting to me is these people who are not entrepreneurs, for whatever reason, mostly that they haven't had a nurture experience of entrepreneurship. Peter might talk about nature and the predisposition to entrepreneurship that we all have in some degree. These people have no business exposure, and then they come to a program such as the Young Enterprise program. Are we going to overcome a lifelong set of influences by this relatively short exposure and create an entrepreneur from them? You see what I mean? It's quite a challenge. And so I see this situation as the test case. Now, if we're going to make entrepreneurship education, then there are 2 things that what we're proposing will do to make it more effective. The first is, if you go down into the younger age groups, maybe years 9 and 10, within a school environment, they're not constrained by exams, they're not constrained by the late teenage sort of conservatism, withdrawing into the unsecurity that, that they're exuberant often, early teenagers, they're lively, they're troubled. And so shifting it down there, I think it will be easier to have a high impact on these guys. So if they are in that situation where we're having to suggest to them that you don't see yourself as an entrepreneur because your family's never suggested it or your circumstances have never suggested it, but actually you could be if you wanted it. We're sort of saying to them, hey, business could be for you. You don't have to, go and work in a factory. So that's the first thing that I think is a valuable point about shifting it down the age group. The second is this point of, if we can make education for enterprise spread over a longer time frame in the person's life, then we must be shifting it slightly from being a proximal influence which is the influences and things at the time of the career decision, so, at their late secondary, early tertiary years. But if we can spread that down through, say, intermediate years through secondary, then we're possibly shifting the enterprise education from proximal to distal, and that must have some effect on making it more successful. So while we have a clear need for community development in South Auckland, we have possibly this perfect storm of education not quite serving the people there. We have the opportunity with Education for Enterprise to develop people's self-esteem, self-efficacy, etc. You can see it's an exciting mix. And now I think I'm handing over to Associate Professor Peter Melville.
Thank you.